Michael, welcome to our show. We are big fans of Veselka as an eatery. We have stuffed our faces at that restaurant many times.
Many.
So, to our delight, um, we found out there was a documentary that chronicled that. And then when we tuned in, it was so much more than
Thank
just
you.
that.
Yeah.
And so, honored to be wearing Roxy.
Yes,
Honored
I've
to
got
be
my
representing.
Veselka mug for today's
Yeah.
event.
Very
And
nice.
so we have lots of questions for you. And my first question, well, my first interrogative question was, what's a non-Ukrainian doing a documentary about a Ukrainian place? But were you a Veselka patron
Yeah, so
before this whole? Yeah.
I went to NYU Film School right around the corner, and a good friend of mine, he'd always harp on me and say, "You're always eating the same Chinese and Italian, and you have to have some great Eastern European. You got to go to Veselka." And he literally like said this over and over and over for a couple years, and finally, I was like, "Fine, we'll go." And like everybody that goes there, I fell in love. And this was during the 24-hour years, so we would go, like out to the bars, and then we'd go over there, and we would play cards in a back corner. Whereas like most diners would like throw you out for playing cards.
Yeah.
Instead, they were like, who's winning? They'd come over and engage you, and all we were having was like toast and hollow toast and coffee at 2 a.m. and they were totally cool with it. I always had a great sense of community and family going there. And that was the initial intent in making the movie, because when I first talked to Tom and Jason, it was before anyone was thinking or talking about a potential war. So the movie was going to be something very different originally.
Oh.
Yeah, a little bit more focused on New York City, the little Ukraine community, and its 70 years, where there's been very mutual feeding between the community and the restaurant and the community.
Wow. Well, that took a turn.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So did you know, other than the food, which obviously you became super familiar with in your gastronomy expeditions there at 2 a.m., did you know much about Ukraine prior to the war or prior to delving into this documentary?
No, not at all. I really learned along the way. I'm half Italian, half German. And my realization is we're all the same, because Ukrainians love family, love food, hardest of workers. I just kind of realize, it doesn't matter where you are in Europe. we're all cut from the same cloth. And I don't, prior to even making the movie, I don't think I knew many Ukrainians, to be honest.
A lot of people, I think, feel that way. Like there's so many times where I've realized that I was the first, Ukrainian American somebody has ever met. They've never heard of Ukraine. And Zorianna and I are both like of the diaspora, which you focused on in this film, which we really appreciate that, because there's a whole other side of war and of culture when you leave a country.
Mm-hmm.
So your film starts 11 days into the Russian invasion of 2022. Can you tell me, or tell us, when you said you were gonna do something else, and then you decided to come in with this story? Like, when did that happen? How fast was it? Who was with you?
So I met with Tom, the second generation owner, and Jason, the current and third generation owner, in November of 2021. And I went in and pitched this, again, story of family and community, and kind of getting to know them and sense how Tom seemed like the reluctant retiree. And they loved the idea. Jason privately came to me and said he really loved the idea because he wanted to have something to pay homage to his dad and all of the hard work from when he took over the business from his father-in-law, Vladimir Darmakwal. And they kind of sat on it for a couple months. And I think it was in maybe January of 2022, early in that month, I just knocked on their door and I didn't hear back. And then when there were these rumblings about a potential war as we got later into January, I contacted them and said, God forbid this war happens. If it does, there might be more resonance and reason for telling your story now. And they just said, okay, but if you do this, we don't want to be exploitative, or we don't want to be sensational. And I said, of course. And they just didn't want me to be there on day one when the war
Mm.
launched. And so I was in agreement, and they said, let's just kind of feel out where this war goes, not knowing that almost 4 years later, it's still happening.
Yeah,
But
no
they
one
just,
knew. Yeah,
yeah,
we
I
had
mean,
no
Yeah.
idea if it was going to be 3 days, 3 years, or 40 days, or yeah.
yeah. So they just want to kind of slowly feel it out and see how the staff and their family, extended family, was reacting to the war. And then what happened was, while my team and I held off for a bit, every news crew in the world came to Veselka, and it became kind of the epicenter in New York, if not the United States, to kind of hear the Ukrainian story as the war started. And so the staff got kind of acclimated to this idea of cameras being there often.
Mhm.
And then when we came in, it was day 11, and Jason kind of told everybody, like, Mike and his team, they're with us. But it took many, many months for people to realize what he meant by that, which was we were not going away. we were going to constantly be there. And, we were not there. This was not transactional. This was not, anything more than we want to observe and learn and honor the different stories that we were observing over time. And so the production itself lasted 1 year, and as you see in the movie, it's the first year of the war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. I was rewatching it. I've seen it twice before. I went to the premiere in Santa Barbara, which was awesome.
Oh, very
Um,
cool.
yeah, and what struck me was, a lot of shows, food shows, restaurant shows, they focus on the actual food, they focus on the cooking, and this film does that. But you go home with our characters. Like,
Mhm.
you made a film that doesn't just show the life of Veselka, but it shows so many backstories and getting into people's houses. That takes a lot of trust. So
Mhm.
you're working with them makes sense. Like, can you expand a little bit on when you decided to go beyond the walls of the Veselka restaurant?
Well, with documentary, you're a fly on the wall and you have to turn on a dime. You can start with your narrative beat sheet of like the 30 plus scenes that you're hopeful will occur, or might occur based on pre-scheduled events in someone's life, or the restaurant's life. But you do have to evolve with the story. And I actually learned on day one. So you see in the movie at the end of Act One, Dima, the grillman, he makes a joke about how well Jason speaks Ukrainian. And I thought, oh, who is this guy? And I said, oh, would you like to be interviewed? And he says, no, 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 I'm very busy. And I said, or he said, I'm not in the mood. And I said, oh, you're very busy. And he goes, no, I'm not very busy. In the first 9 days of the war, I lost 9 of my friends. And
Mm.
you hear like my heart sunk. It was the first moment where anyone really shared anything deeply personal in that first day of filming. And that's when I went home going, this is going to be a completely different movie and story. And I have to kind of retrain my thinking as to where I need to go with this.
I have to jump in here because you just triggered a memory for me. Uh, Roxy and I were talking earlier about like how when the war first started, we were both kind of catatonic, like just kind
Mhm.
of like zombies trying to figure out like processing it, and then before kind of putting that energy into some type of action. But I also remember I think it was 2023, and I went to New York, and then I went to Veselka, and I walked in there and it was packed. And like I didn't realize how much I was holding in, and
Mhm.
it was packed, and seeing all walks of life in that place. And I walked in, I was by myself. A very nice Ukrainian young man from Ukraine seated me. I sat down, and he gave me the menu, and I already know, like, I'm gonna have borscht, I'm gonna have varenka, I'm gonna have hollandaise. Like, I don't even need to see your menu. I know I'm just gonna. That's the base level, right?
Yeah.
And I just sat there and I just looked around, and like I just burst into tears. Like, I
Mhm.
burst into tears because I just felt like I felt the love in that place. And I had realized I hadn't had a chance to just decompress. And it was so affecting for me. And hearing you say about the other characters in the film coming around, it's because you then need an outlet, and
Mhm.
that's the ultimate safe space for them and for patrons as well.
Right. Well, that's what I found interesting too. As you know, I always kind of knew the back of the menu history of the restaurant. And as I got to know them better and speak with other family members of Jason and Tom's, I learned that when Vladimir opened the storefront in 1954, initially as a candy store newspaper stand, it still was a place for people displaced by World War II.
Mhm.
So, that's the mirror image of what Jason and Tom did now. I mean, it's so poignant that the restaurant, while being popular for so many decades, it really refound its reason for being. And Tom and Jason, because they have such big hearts, they recognized it as such, that this
Right.
has to be more than just a place to eat. And they've always known that. Like you see in the movie, we talk about
Mhm.
different moments in New York, from Superstorm Sandy to COVID, 9/11, where they always
Mm.
kept their doors open, even if the city was like, no, 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 everything has to shut down, like
Yeah.
Superstorm Sandy.
Yeah.
So they've always been wired to be the heart of the community.
Mhm.
So it was almost like this was, that was training for this. They were like mentally prepared
Mm.
for this
Mhm.
because this is even more deeply personal for all
Yeah.
of
And you
Yeah.
really hit that really well in this film
them.
because I'm from Cleveland, Ukrainian diaspora, first generation. And my
Yeah.
mom would tell me about Veselka's. She's like, in New York City, it's a candy shop. There's this candy shop. And my first time in New York, the first restaurant I ever ate in I went to NYU Film School as well. So
Oh, very cool.
when I first went to see NYU, the place we went to was Veselka's. That was where we started the journey of moving to a new city because it
Yeah.
had this home feeling. And I really appreciate it in the film when you go back and tell that diaspora generational story because
Yeah.
it's not just the past, it's the present and it's the
Mhm.
future. And you shape that really well. I noticed you edited the film. So
Yes.
my question is like, is when you are editing and you're putting the footage together and you're thinking about how to tell such a multi-layered story, like where did you first begin and how did you get to these additional little details and parts?
So I'll kind of repeat something I shared a few minutes ago. I start with a beat sheet, right? So
Hmm.
I had all these scenarios that I kind of knew were going to occur based on stuff that Jason was telling me about different events that were coming up or people coming by. And then there was like all the hopeful moments of where, as I saw, maybe this was a thread I should follow, a person, a storyline. So you're evolving, you're kind of editing in your mind as you're filming it.
Mm.
And then I really started editing it once we were past the 1 year commemoration of the war.
Oh,
I
you
knew
didn't
that.
cut before.
Say that again.
You didn't cut anything before, really, or you just?
No,
Oh.
nothing really.
Wow.
Yeah, it was because I had it in my mind of where I was taking it as I was filming it, and I also knew that I wanted the movie to come out as soon as possible,
Mhm.
and kind of set this goal of we should be out during the second year commemoration, which we did. And, you experienced the opening at Santa Barbara. And so I backed out of that goal of, February 24th, 2 years after the war started, and said, okay, what do I need for post-production to achieve that delivery? And so it forced me to really just have a quick editorial period. I would have reopened the edit up had like some other narrative or something major occurred. The sad truth is that, everything is largely the same, not only when I was finishing the movie towards year 2 of the war, but, nearly 4 years later, it's largely the same. I just had a target delivery date on it, and a lot of decisions, were kind of made just on impulse of like, I only have so much time. Here's what I have. Let me tell what I have the best way I can.
Yeah.
It's funny because as I was filming, certain events I didn't expect to occur. So I didn't know the baseball team from Ukraine was going to show up. I didn't know that Veselka was going to be honored at the US Open. And so there's so many moments in the movie where you think, oh, there's going to be a movie that's kind of like in this restaurant the whole time. But it has a bigger scope than that. I think people are surprised by how it starts to open up, especially, I don't want to give too much away, but with, someone's relative coming in to the United States and we go with them to the airport. It's like, it's a much bigger movie than I think most people expect.
Yeah. I am, when I saw the movie, and the former mayor, Eric Adams, was in it.
Yeah.
I sometimes look at that film as the barometer of where his career is, because at that moment he was at the highest point that he will have ever been. And yet he was so not present in the restaurant and so self-aware of like the looky-loos outside taking pictures of him and waving to them. And I was just like, what a missed opportunity for a guy who was of the community, who
but
was
also
literally, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
But Jason's face, I love.
Oh, when he rubs his head, like the reaction.
I was like, that guy wanted to launch across that table. Had to have.
Yeah.
Michael, how was that moment for you?
Yes, totally.
That was, day 2 for us, day 12 of the war. And so again, turning on a dime as a documentary filmmaker, when you as an audience see the night before the mayor comes, you hear Jason tell his family at dinner, oh, the mayor's coming tomorrow. That was the first time I heard that. So after we were filming, I went over to Jason and I said, did I hear you right? Did you say Eric Adams is coming tomorrow to the, yeah. Do you want to be here for that? I'm like, Jason, of course. I'm like, we gotta get in this on the same lane here. Anything like that, I gotta be here for that. So we got very little sleep because it was a very long first day. And we just turned it around and came back the next morning. And it was just, I couldn't believe it was one of those moments where I see all these wonderful documentaries that come out. There'll be a moment like that. And I go, how did a filmmaker luck out with that? Like, that's like, catching lightning in a bottle. And when it happened, I was like, it really hit me. I was like, wow, we're catching lightning in a bottle, because I couldn't believe what he was doing in real time. And there's much more of it on the editing room floor. I mean, I could have beat the guy up, but this is not a movie about Eric Adams.
Yeah.
But it was really important too in it, again, the message of it, that moment being, we can't just look to our local or federal officials for change or support. And that's where, for Jason, he realized it. And so that's a turning point for Jason in the story, where he just kind of full force goes to support the local community, the restaurant staff, people in Ukraine. So yeah, it was just one of those moments that was very surreal, but it was so important that it happened, because it really is a real trigger for a catalyst for things that come after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Veselka's was that place. People would ask, where do we donate clothes or things to ship off? And you would bring it to Veselka.
It was all in the back storeroom,
Right.
and they
Right.
would bring it over, like these cartloads full over to the Ukrainian church. And that was another moment that was like lightning in a bottle. We got there, and the Dumka choir was rehearsing. They had just been on Saturday Night Live, I think, like the week prior, singing the show open,
Yeah, I
when the
remember
war
that.
started. And
Yeah.
we went downstairs, and it was like we were living in a movie, because it was like this angelic sound was echoing through the hallways. And again, like you said, when you went into Veselka in 2023, and it just like this emotion hit you when we were in that basement. Again, the totality of all that was going on hit me, the crew, and it was just, I thankful that we were well timed to be there when they were performing.
Yeah. Just, documentaries, man, it's like half of it is kismet in a way, right?
Yeah. My goal is always, you tell the story truthfully. If you don't have it, you don't manipulate it. You either give up at that case in that case, or start filming other things, but you have to uh, tell it truthfully.
What
Yeah.
was the most challenging aspect of telling a story that felt largely contained in a specific area? It's not like you weren't flying into a war zone. You didn't have to go to DC to be part of some, government thing that Jason may have been doing. Like you largely were contained.
Right. Well, I joke with people all the time that, there's the rules of filmmaking of, don't film on water, or film with animals, or film with small children. I add, do not film in a very popular active restaurant in New York City, because it was a real challenge. While the main dining area is large, it's packed all the time. So outside of maybe a couple hours in weird parts of the early part of the day, like, you'll have some mobility. But the minute you go into that kitchen downstairs in the basement, or back with the grillman, and we had multiple cameras a lot of times, it was like this dance of trying to stay out of everybody's way and get what you needed.
How do you even decide where to begin with music on a documentary like this?
I knew for this, I want to do kind of an East meets West mashup. So for me, when I think New York, I think jazz, I think saxophone, and then I want to have kind of a Ukraine folk sound. So we did that mashup and brought in David Sanborn, like 6-time Grammy award winning saxophonist, to perform the saxophone tracks. He's not a born and bred New Yorker, but largely lived in New York a majority of his life. He knew Veselka and was so supportive and wanted to be involved.
I have a question for you about language, actually. You're working with refugee waiters and chefs and cooks, and they're not speaking English, and they're all speaking Ukrainian. Like, how did you understand what was happening? Did you know what you were getting? How did you feel in that environment with like everyone just speaking Ukrainian?
I say to Jason, would you translate for me? And he says, they know what you're saying. They just didn't want to open up, and they didn't want to share. But as time went on, and Vitaly became not only a focal point of the movie, he became a real ally in production. And like all the translations you see on screen, he did for me.
Mm.
So there were
Oh,
times where I would text him at the end of a day, and I'd be editing very late at night or something, or if we had just been shooting, I would send him a clip on his cell phone, and I would say, hey, what are they saying here? And he would translate it back to me. The movie is a very different movie than I've ever made, because I felt it was really less a kind of event driven movie, and really more of a character study. And I wanted to make something that just kind of wore its heart on its sleeve, and just make sure that no one felt that this was transactional. If I'm going to be with this, family and extended family for, a very long time, I need them to trust me and be aware it's not transactional. And then towards the end, I screened it for Vitaly and Justin and Jason and Tom and a few other people. And I wanted their sign off before I ever asked them, could you please sign any sort of release to be involved in this? And that was at the very end. And again, that kind of breaks the business rules of
It's risky.
filmmaking. It's
It
risky.
is risky. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just felt, I need to honor these people and not make them feel like, hey, trust me, now sign this.
Yeah.
It felt wrong in
Yeah.
this situation. And I think as a result of that, people were willing to open up and communicate with me over time.
What did you learn about yourself in this process? I mean, the war has been very transformational for so many people, those living through it, those that are in close proximity to it, but for someone like yourself, that you've immersed yourself in this community, in this culture, in the food, in the language, how have you come out on the other side? I mean, you cannot possibly be the same person that you
Yeah.
were when you first entered the project.
I think I'm so shocked by how this is such a black and white situation. There is good and there's bad and there's right and there's wrong. And the fact that anyone is making this gray and is allowing this to go on for almost 4 years, it's absurd.
Yeah.
It's absurd. It's all the adults have left the room.
Yeah.
And it does not make any sense to me.
It does take like a documentary like the Veselka documentary for non-Ukrainian people to kind of plug in. And you need
Right.
these different channels to understand a community and a war and a culture. And like what I love too about this film, it shows you this diaspora, the world outside of Ukraine. And that is something that people can touch. They can go to Veselka's. An audience member can then see the film. They can recognize the characters in the film as their own. They can see the generations, the father-son business model in their own family. And so having art, having films, having stories like this one specifically, that's not just a war story in a war, is so important.
And one of the things that my eyes were open to in doing different screenings around the country, in various parts of the country, people came up to me and said, I'm not Ukrainian, but I am an immigrant. And they were as emotional and touched watching the movie, coming from a different part of the globe than Ukraine, because they said, I felt everything that the Ukrainians in this movie are feeling and have felt.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing is like the universal themes are what make these movies kind of have longevity. And so, I always tell people, oh, you think you're going in for one thing watching this, but you're going to come out with such a range of feelings and emotions that, you don't have to go in this being, aware of everything that's going on in Ukraine. Again, it's about family and community and these universal themes. So, yeah, I mean, food is a great entry point just to kind of get an understanding of any culture.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. I think you had theatrical release. Like, how did that come to be? Like, what was that experience?
With the US theatrical, or North America, I should say, because we were in Canada as well, that was just, working with all these different theaters and theater chains. And with Ukraine, that was Planeto Kino knocking on my door. They were aware of the movie.
Wow.
And while I was in Santa Barbara for our, I guess, festival debut, I was in the midst of like working that out with them to then open up in, 6 different cities 2 weeks later. So it was really one of those amazing situations where, they knocked on my door, the timing worked out perfectly. And so they opened a day before we did in North America. It was February 23rd there. And we were ran 1 week. I wanted to run longer, but we were out when Dune was out, so we couldn't compete with Dune. But what was really lovely about it on multiple levels, but one of the things that I really loved was the Ukraine baseball team, which is heavily featured in the documentary. Their coach said, and one of their representatives planned to bring them to the opening in Kyiv. And I said, awesome, like, please send photos, anything that you can, because I want to see everybody like enjoying the movie. And so they brought all these like young, like 12, 13, 14-year-old kids to see the documentary. And the next day after it opened, I got this beautiful photo of probably like 50, 60 people standing in front of this huge screen in Kyiv. And I just said, okay, I did my job. Like, that was the goal, was to get the movie there. And we did. New York, we had an incredible run. We were at the Village East, which is 2 blocks up 2nd Avenue, across the avenue from Veselka. And we ran there for 6 weeks. We were really, really fortunate that, as I always have to explain to people, we didn't rent these theaters. Like, we were getting, they were booking us, right?
Wow.
We didn't pay a dime. Like, all these theaters across North America just said, no, we want to share this story. It's amazing that we pulled it off in a climate where indie movies often aren't taken that seriously.
That is the lightning in a bottle for so many filmmakers. Yeah. How did you, I can't believe we forgot to ask, or haven't asked yet, about David Duchovny.
David Duchovny popped into my head right away because I knew through Tom and Jason that he grew up 2 blocks north on, I think, 2nd Avenue and 11th Street. So he would speak from the heart, and he couldn't have been more wonderful. I went out to LA and we met, and just a wonderful, lighthearted guy, and just it was really a great moment. And it's funny because I had forgotten, really, because it's been so many years, that he, pretty much every other episode of X-Files, he's narrating the show. So what was funny was somebody on Letterboxd posted, having David Duchovny narrate is like, on one hand, the craziest thing ever, and also like simply perfect.
Okay, so how can people watch the Veselka film?
So it's streaming on Prime and on Canopy, which is an amazing resource just using your library card, and Tubi. And then it's for purchase, like, everywhere from Apple to Google. And then we have the Blu-ray, which is special. It has, if you want to hear more from me, there's director's commentary. And, you can get that at veselkamovie.com.
So before we wrap this up, what is your favorite Ukrainian food?
The stuffed cabbage.
Nice.
I didn't even have to think about it.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
And also honey cake.
Oh, yeah. Delicious.
Like, especially at Veselka, their honey cake is absurdly good. And we would like watch them, like we were filming them, making them like early on, and we hadn't eaten any of it yet, but it was like, torture, because you're watching it being made, and you can't have any because you're working. And then at some point, I forgot who it was, maybe it was the pastry chef, was like, oh, you have to try this. And I fell in love.
Michael, it's so nice to talk with you. This was really fun.
Thank you both.